and you're taking over me with love that never stops, forever call. You call me by my name and now I'll never be the same. We will never stop following your love, 'cause you're irresistible, you're irresistible. Lord, we praise you. Nothing satisfies like you do. You never change, you won't, you never fail, you won't. You're irresistible, you're irresistible. Everlasting, you were stronger than the grave. All our fears fade, oh, by the power of your name. With a love that never stops, forever call. You call me by my name and now I'll never be the same. We will never stop following your love, 'cause you're irresistible, you're irresistible. Lord, we praise you. Nothing satisfies like you do. You never change, you won't, you never fail, you won't. You're irresistible, you're irresistible. Lord, we praise you. Nothing satisfies like you do. You never change, you won't, you never fail, you won't. You're irresistible, you're irresistible. Through the darkness, in a weakness, you made a way, you made a way. We were broken, lost and hopeless. Our lives you changed, our lives you changed. Through the darkness, in a weakness, you made a way, you made a way. Whoa. Lord, we praise you. Nothing satisfies like you do. You never change, you won't, you never fail, you won't. You're irresistible, you're irresistible. Lord, we praise you. Nothing satisfies like you do. You never change, you won't, you never fail, you won't. You're irresistible, you're irresistible. You're So my name is B.J. Thompson. I am a Dallas native, not a Cowboy fan or hater. Grew up, I was born to a mother who had me at the age of 16, 17 years old. My dad left school in the 10th grade, and I'm the oldest of 3 children. A lot of my life, I have had to lead and to figure things out, as you can imagine, right? And so much so, as I look back at my life, I realize that every aspect of my life, manhood and the not, like I've had to think like, man, what seems right to me, right? So, growing up in Dallas, one of the things that was key is that you see that there's the culture that really celebrates men finding their value in, subduing women, overcoming women, or not being controlled by love and women. And so I just picked that up, right? Because it was just a natural part of the environment. I was leading in some ways, but also still impressioning in a lot of ways. And so my first understandings of what it meant to be a man and thinking about a man was that you work hard, but then you find your worth in being able to say, I have connection with women, but I don't love them, right? And so the old additive, there's a video with Snoop Dogg. He said, we don't love them though, right? So it's like, I have them, but I don't love them. And I was even as you're saying this, it's all coming to me now. I remember thinking at the age of 13, 14 years old, because a lot of our friends were discovering women and they wanted to take their relationships deeper. And many of my friends were saying they were losing their virginity. And so even as I'm thinking about this idea, a lot of us started gravitating to being able to champion the fact that we were no longer virgins. And so it was the goal of a middle schooler to find someone who they could lose their virginity with, right? And so my entryway into sexuality started with, saying I'm going to find worth and value in my environment. But what I found was a culture that celebrated me giving away my virginity and being able to say I did it without love. And so I just stepped into it, right? So I went full throttle into high school, into early college, with just like, man, I want to find connection, but I don't want to find love. And so my experiences with it is I found that it was fun. It's fun for a season of life. But then the more I wanted to get more out of it, I found there was nothing more than just the initial rush of that. And it caused a lot of confusion. So I would say my experiences with sexuality in my early on connections really was, if I could find worth in this, then I would find this. And what I ended up finding was the thing I thought I was going to get, I never got. It may not be that you love it. It may just be that you're covering and coping with pain, right? So this is one of the key things that is necessary to create sustainability is sometimes you have to slow down enough to discover pain, right? So when you remove something like porn or you remove something like unhealthy food, now you're left with whatever situation, circumstance, and pain that you're actually experiencing. And that is the thing that you have to deal with in order to begin to build into the new habits, right? And so what I would say is many times we're unconsciously operating with unhealthy foods, sexual addiction, all these different things, because there really is something else that's quietly and subconsciously like causing us pain. Maybe that's fear. Maybe that's depression. Maybe that's isolation. Maybe maybe we are anxious about the next season of our life. And so instead of dealing with those things, we run to chocolate cake, or we run to Coke, or we run to Snickers, or we run to porn. And I think that the more you begin to deal with the root issue itself, now you can catch yourself, because you no longer need those Snickers. You no longer need porn. You no longer need these things, because you're beginning to deal with the holistic development of who you are. I would say we're absolutely cutting corners around relationships. We are hardwired to connect with other people. There's studies that came out early about how children, when they're not touched at childhood, like there's something neurologically and physiologically about them that does not develop. Their organs, their brains don't develop. And so human beings are hardwired with a need for touch and connection. So much so that if they don't get it, their organs don't develop the way that they should. Their brains don't develop how they ought to, right? And so what's happened in technology is technology has given us access to other people, and it's created the experience of certain types of connection void of the substance of what it would take for us to get a deeper connection. Here's what I mean. If you ate donuts every morning for breakfast, right? You could eat enough donuts that would make you feel full, right? Even, yeah, sugar high, right? But you would not eat enough donuts ever to help your body gain the substance that it needs from being filled up. And so every morning you're filling up with donuts every single morning and you feel full. But something about your organs, your body, your kidney, like they're not growing and developing how they should, because what you're fueling it with are not sustainable. And I think this is what's starting to happen in really the culture that we're starting to see and how we connect online is you can get as much as you want as long as you want it. But it does not mean that the thing that it's intended to do and what you desire for it to do will actually happen. And so I would say until you learn the skills of how to develop meaningful intimacy and connection in relationships, you're going to find yourself with a lot of headaches from the way we try to connect with each other. So I was born and raised in the purity generation. Come make a pledge, right? So they come to your school, you'd sign a banner, and you would say what you were not going to do. And so many of the generation before us, the 60s generation, many of them created, because they lived in such a free kind of experience, the reaction to the children was, we'll tell you what not to do, right? We have a list of what you should not do. And so the parenting style really moved towards, if you could just make a pledge, if you could just say you'll never do this, you say you'll never do that. And it became a rule list of what you would and would not do. And that seems like a good thing because you're subduing a lot of behaviors that would scare you and that would create anxiety in you. But what it did was it shortchanged the emotional intelligence of an entire generation. And so now you have these young people who all they know about sex is what they should not do. They should not have sex. They should not experience these particular things. But they don't know what a relationship is. They don't understand the interpersonal experience. They don't know how do you build a friendship. If you kiss dating goodbye, that means that the first person that you date, you marry, right? And that's a very unhealthy way of seeing human beings, is that if I put the pressure on myself to have to marry the first person that I date, now that means that all of the things that I could have gained through relationships throughout the span leading up to that, I don't even have an experience bucket for that, right? I can't contrast it to anything. I'm not growing in my ability to know how to have fuller relationships. And so what I say about this is that now we expect these adults, these kids who are being raised in this do and don't list, when they become adults, now we're expecting the world to be this neat as adults. And we know for sure, if you're an adult past the age of 19, 21, life isn't that neat, right? You have to learn a lot of things through your emotional intelligence and through your spiritual development and through your physical health. There's a lot of things that you need. And I think we failed them. I genuinely think that we failed them. A lot of people are asking themselves, should they live with their boyfriend, girlfriend, or someone who's not their husband or wife, right? And what I would say is, a lot of times we look at the situation, we say, oh, I'm saving money, or I'm getting to know this person. And I would say that the reason why there's good in it, there's good because you get to connect with someone, right? You get to get close to them. It's unwise because you're giving what we call more intimacy than you have commitment, okay? There's a rule in relationships, it's unspoken, right? There's kind of this thing. The basis of the rules starts with this. There is commitment, there is trust, and then there's intimacy. Commitment is the foundation of all relationships. It then dictates to you how much connection, how much growth, how much things. It would be weird for you to walk up to the clerk at the grocery store and to give them a hug and a kiss. Be like, why are you doing this? I don't know you like this, right? Because you don't have a commitment to them, but it would be appropriate for you to hand them a $20 bill to pay for your groceries, right? And so a lot of times we try to usurp or we try to sidestep this process by going straight to the intimacy in order to build the commitment. The problem with it is when you give people too much intimacy without defining the commitment of what the commitment is, you put yourself in a very vulnerable situation to where the person does not have to reciprocate with any type of expectation all of the vulnerability that you're giving to them, right? So what I would say is the reason why I would say it's unwise is because you are so precious and you are so valuable. Why would you give yourself, the beauty of yourself, in a way that's so unsecure that a person could just walk away with all of your heart, right? And so I think that's more of the conversation than anything else, is that because you are so worthy and you are so valuable, it is unwise to try to give all of you, just like you would do in a husband-wife relationship, to someone who is committed to only some of you, right? And so when we're talking about living together, until a person can say, I'm committed to all of you in a way that matters, then you are putting a lot of weight on something that really isn't there yet, and you're more valuable than that. So the idea of misogyny is the idea where men, simplified, do not have the consideration. There's inequality in the relationship between men and women. And the relationship allows for a man to treat a woman not as an equal, but as an object, right? And however that is, if that's power, if that's authority, if that's sexuality, if that's in the way that he gives and reveres, it's objectification. Misogyny is just that, right? But misogyny is built on social norms, right? So social norms is a man has these things that are given to him by the society. And then now the society says, this is what a man is. This is what a man does. This is what a woman does. And so misogyny is when a man goes with a social norm that gives him an unequal advantage or unequal ability of power that does not give the woman her due just as being an equal image bearer in the name of God, right? And so a lot of these conversations I think are healthy because they're very new for a generation. There is a generation that have not taken the time out to say, what is misogyny? Could I be misogynistic, right? The fact that I have no connections of friendship of the opposite sex, it could be that I have a sense of misogyny that I don't believe. I don't know. I either don't know or I'm just unaware of how I'm being misogynistic or over speaking a woman. Let's just say a woman is in a room and she's trying to speak and you talk over her. It's like you could be practicing misogyny, right? The beauty of slowing down to ask ourselves, how are we treating one another, is it gives us a chance to love in a more full way, right? The problem, though, is when those things are still not tied into a moral foundation, like something that precedes you. Now you find yourself on what I call the cultural tidal wave. So first is this, and then it's that, and then it's this, and then it's that. And it moves so much that now there really is not an idea of what it means for me to have a firm sense of equality because now the fluidity of it changes so much. And so what I would say for those who are asking, how do I deal with Me Too? First and foremost, we all need to ask ourselves, how are we loving people that are not like us, right? I think that's the real question. The second thing is, it's okay to do a deep dive to say, man, I am guilty of not loving people different from me in the way that I would want love, respect, kindness, treatment, right? But the last thing I think is this is really the very important thing. What is the basis for you doing so, right? The basis for me doing so is the fact that my creator, God, the creator of all creation, looked at everything and said it was good, right? Then he also looked at man and woman and he said, out of man came woman, like my bone, my flesh. And so now my lenses on life, my lenses on women have to come out of the fact that all things are good. God said all things are good. But then out of this bone of man, now there's a woman who is a helpmate and an equal to who he is. So because that's the foundation, now when I come to these topics, I go, man, I need to put those lenses on just as much as I need to be sensitive and be aware of all those things. So culture is just the habits of human beings in society. That's all it is. And it's the acceptable habits of human beings in society. Unfortunately, when you get into the Hollywood, artistic, creative spaces, because sex sells, because misogyny sells, because certain distortions of relationships sell, then that's what it's about, right? You got to report your numbers. You got to like those big budgets, there's marketing budgets, there's deadlines, box opens. You need to be able to say, we sold this many. And I think the greatest challenge specifically to those who feel very passionate about equality, especially in the creative spaces, is there still has to be some set standard of what that means so that they don't become like gross hypocrites, right? I don't think it's just the artistic community though. I think it's all communities. I think it's the religious right community. I think it's like all these things, like there's not enough self-examination to see whether or not you are actually doing the things that you're railing against, like racism, like sexism, like any of any ism, right? I think it's challenging when we allow people who are being incentivized through budgets and through box office numbers to set the tone for how we look at relationships. And I think that is the challenge, is because people are incentivized to do so through box office numbers. I don't think that it's a reliable source to understand the makeup of how you're supposed to connect with other people. And because of that, now we need to know that that's really fiction. That's not the truth. And as long as you're operating with that, now there has to be people in your life who you're looking for sound relationships, sometimes without the flash, right? So I've been married for 18 years this year, and my relationship is not always the flash, but it's the quiet connection, it's the consistency, it's the love that makes that work. And so what I would say is, it's probably more important that we find people that give us those ways to quietly connect, quietly to love, quietly to experience relationships, so that when we do see things displayed on the screen, we have something to contrast it to, right? Here's the last thing I want to say. For those of us who feel very frustrated by how this young generation is so easily swayed by Hollywood or through visuals on a screen, right? Instead of becoming a critic of the generation and how much they don't see it and they don't get it, become a mentor. Let that drive you to become somebody's mentor. Find someone, take them to lunch, begin to encourage them, develop them, so that now you don't become an old gripe of young people. We love relationship goals. We love to celebrate people who, like, they make us feel good. Like, we look at their relationship and we say, man, this is it. And you long to have that relationship goal. And the thing that may not be as known about marriage and relationships is, in order to have a healthy one, it is a struggle and it is a fight. There is no automation to a healthy relationship. I heard someone recently, a guy was talking about how, I know you guys see us on screen. You see us all the time on screen. What you don't know is off screen, we have a lot of hard talks. We wrestle through things. We have to come to agreement. We have to apologize. We have to begin to set vision forward. And then we have to get our own healing from our past, right? And so I think something that's interesting about relationships and healthy good relationships is that you don't recognize, if you're going to have one, it's going to be a wrestle all the time, right? And so what I mean when I say being a cute couple is easy. It's easy to sit in front of a camera, take a selfie, and then put it on social media. It is extremely challenging to come face to face with yourself in waves and stages through the lifetime of a marriage with another person, right? When I first got married, one of the most shocking things in my life, I remember laying in the bed, maybe a few months after marriage, weeping. I was like, what did I get myself into, right? And this is in contrast to the wedding day. The wedding day was like so exciting, so great, so fun. Everybody's there. Everybody's happy. Everybody's excited. I'm excited. You excited? We all excited, right? 3 months later, when that band leaves, when that photographer leaves, when the cake is gone, when that pastor is gone, when that congregation that's dressed pretty is gone, it's just you and another person trying to wrestle out what life is and how you become one. And that's the part I was not prepared for. I was not prepared for the work that it was going to take to actually build a marriage. I thought if you're married, then it'll just happen over time, right? And so I think that the struggles of marriage really come because maybe for the first time, you've never really seen yourself before, right? You think things about yourself that are not true. You're not that kind, right? Like you're not that forgiving. You're not that generous. You have things about you you've never seen. And now you have someone looking you in the face, making it known to you, right? And I would just say, when you think about the wrestles of that, it's similar to a butterfly, right? So let's just talk a little bit about marriage and how it compares to a caterpillar butterfly, right? So the caterpillar, it starts out as this little worm, and he's just inching his way along. That's us in life. We're just inching our way along. And then he gets to this place where he needs to change, or he or she needs to change into something else. So what happens with this little worm? They go and settle down somewhere. And then out of that, there is something that spins a cocoon to where they can't inch along anymore. They can't move, right? And as they're in this little thing called a cocoon, locked in, they still want to move, right? They still want to leave, but they have to wrestle now, right? Now they're no longer able to just quickly wrestle. And what happens over time as they wrestle? As they wrestle, they begin to crack the cocoon, right? But then when they get out of the cocoon, they don't come out like they thought they were. They look up and they have something on the back called wings, right? You see, it's the struggle of life, of love, and relationships that create in us a new version, healthier version of ourselves that we've never even imagined, right? And I think that oftentimes we want that beauty of that flying caterpillar without the struggle of commitment, of faithfulness, of trying to be sexually moral, of emotional health and getting healing. We want all of that without the struggle. And what I would say is, no, you'll just be a caterpillar. If you're going to be a butterfly, you're going to have to struggle through relationships and love. What teens have to know about marriage is they need to find married couples that they look up to. That's probably one of the most important things, is that you need relationships with people who have good relationships. And you need to do two things. You need to watch them first, and then you need to ask questions, right? There's a saying that kids are great observers, horrible interpreters, right? So you can observe something and think you know what it is, but it's not until you ask questions about what it is that you know how it works. And what I would say is, teens, it is so important. If maybe you come from a background where you have a single parent household, or parents are divorced, or you've been raised in foster care, or you're adopted, or maybe your parents are married but they're not healthy. The thing that you can do is try to identify healthy relationships around you, adult relationships, and just observe, right? Observe, what do they do as much as you can. How is this? What does this work? And then ask questions about how it works and how it came to be. And so I think that part of the thing that we have told teens that they don't need to do is, we said, just get your boyfriend, girlfriend, be in a relationship, and just learn from your peers. And what it does, it leads to a lot of harmful mistakes, because all you know is what people around you are doing. You don't know what's ahead. And so what I would say is, part of the deconstruction is knowing you do need to have some type of role model of marriage. And again, to what I was saying earlier, it can't just come on a screen, because that screen oftentimes is an image of people who are actors, They're not real. Those relationship dynamics could be real, but they may not be healthy because they predicated on box office numbers, ratings, marketers, all these different things. And then I would just say last thing is reading books on relationships. I don't know why teens don't read books on relationships. If you're going to drive a car, they give you this thing. You have to read through the manual on learning how to drive on the road. What are the rules? What are the different things? And then you get behind the wheel and you practice with someone who's more experienced. The same is true with relationships. Oftentimes, we don't want to learn anything, but I would encourage you, read books on sexuality, on interpersonal relationships, on the flow of relationship dating. Read books on it and then jump in the seat with someone who's wiser, who's older, and as you practice opposite sex relationships. This is a great conversation. So for those parents who want to have conversations with their teens about sex, sexuality, and gender, I'll just say this. It is tough. It is tough. There's no cookie cutter answer, but it is possible for you to give your children a healthy experience, a healthy response to these things that does not pressure them to have to make up their mind on all things, right? So I would say the first thing is if you're an adult trying to have these conversations with your teen or your child, take the pressure off yourself, right? Because there won't be one moment, one conversation that will totally, help them reimagine everything. It's the fact that you're having intentional conversations with them. The second thing I would say is know your child, right? It's very challenging when you're trying to speak to someone and you don't actually know them. And so your relationship to them is just as important as their relationship to other people. And so you being in relationship and you knowing who they are and what they're about and what some of the things they struggle with, it's just as important as them being in another relationship. The other thing I would say is this. There's a generation now that's forcing a declaration of what they are. And I would say to parents, tell your kids, share with your teens and your kids to take the pressure off themselves to do that. They don't have to declare their sexuality. They don't have to declare all these things about themselves. Their brains are still forming. They're still young kids learning themselves. I remember sharing with my daughter, I just said, there's things that I said at 5 that I did differently at 10. There's certain things that I said at 13 that I did differently at 17. There's certain things that I said at 19 that I did differently at 20. There's certain things I did last week that I said. And I said, you do not have to lock yourself into a declaration about something. Therefore, this does not have to become your identity. Last thing is this. There's so much pressure to put your sexuality as your identity that it really creates a very unhealthy relationship. No, you are, Tabitha, you are Joshua, you are that person. Your identity is not your sexuality, right? And I think that one of the things that parents can do is as they create love and connection with their kids is bringing not just themselves relationally, but other healthy adults like mentors who are a little bit older into their lives so that they can start experiencing, man, I'm more than just my sexuality. I'm not just this one aspect of me that needs to be expressed. And therefore, you can start helping create healthy teens. I used to think the job of the parent was to give children all you knew about life. What I realized is that the best parenting happens when you decide to become a healthy person. Literally, the more you decide to grow as an individual and stay on the journey of becoming a healthy person, the better your parenting will get over time. And I just think that as you are an adult parenting, raising teens, stay on that journey, focus on that journey, and then your children and those who are under you will get the outpouring of the growth that you're having. So the purpose of marriage is ultimately to reflect a greater love between the creator and the creation. And when you think about love, love is something that everybody wants. The problem with it is life distorts it. Pain, grief, loss, injustice distorts love. Marriage is specific because marriage is the commitment to one person around the intent to become a greater growing picture of this experience with the creator and the creation, right? And what you see at the heart of marriage, and this is really key, is not sex, right? Sex is a part of it. At the heart of marriage is friendship. I'm gonna tell you how this all works itself out. So in the beginning, you see, if you're reading the Bible, that the Lord our God walked through the garden, the cool of the day. And he has this relationship with Adam. And then Adam gets married, a serpent enters, they're tempted, and then now God has to make immense sacrifice. There's a sacrifice that comes. But why is he sacrificing? Well, you don't know until you read the rest of the story. You start reading through the story, read through the books, you start saying, man, you love these people, you want to free them, you want to bring them into right relationship with you, and then you keep going all the way down the story, and here's what you get at the end of Revelation. He says that I will be their God, they will be my people. And you're like, what is this? What is this all about? What it's all about is that the Creator wants a friendship with his creation. And I think that the problem that we have with marriage is we see marriage as just commitment, or we see marriage as just as obligation. We don't see marriage, biblical marriage, as an opportunity to display mature friendship between man, woman, and the Creator. So what is a biblical marriage? The difference between cultural marriage and the biblical marriage is that we're enacting friendship between a trifecta: man, woman, Creator. Why? Because in the ultimate scene, when it's all said and done, what will exist? The relationship between man, woman, and the Creator. What happened in the beginning? The Creator created man, woman, and they had friendship, right? And so what you see is the goal of marriage is really mature friendship between man, woman, and Creator. And as we do that more, that's what speaks volumes to the culture around us. So I love the ocean. I love it. I think it's beautiful. The first time I ever went, I was blown away by the ocean. I didn't know the ocean was that big, right? I thought the ocean had some depth. I didn't know how vast the ocean actually was. But when the first time you go to the ocean, it's so beautiful. You see the rocks, look like rocks. They're really shells on the shore. And there's sand, there's water, there's beach. It's beautiful. It's incredible, right? And many people will sit there all day just admiring the beauty, just sitting in the waves, letting the waves hit them back and forth, right? But that same beach, sand, water, in your living room is no longer beautiful. Now we call that a disaster. Why? Right? Because that beach, that sand, that water, it's beautiful only when it has boundaries, right? Anything in life that does not have boundaries loses its beauty. The reason why sex within relationship creates beauty is because now all the beauty and the value of who you are can be poured into a trusted place. It has boundaries. When it leaves outside of that, right? Now the beauty of who you are can become a disaster. It can lead to a lot of heartache. It can lead to depression. It can lead to a lot of confusion. And it leads to a lot of sense of disconnection or discontinuity between your mind, body, soul, and spirit, right? Because you're having to disconnect one piece of you to be there, right? So, what I would say is part of the reason why we champion sex within the context isn't just to have a bunch of rules, it's to protect the specialness of who you are. You're pouring out the specialness of who you are and the greatest vulnerability that you can have with your body. We're saying, no, that's so special. It deserves to be put in a place that's really secure and really firm, that people know, oh no, this is contained here in this bottle. So my experience in being in relationships is because I've always seen a culture of men saying just championing a woman, right, without giving her love. I lost the idea. It's escaped on me the idea of just having a friend, right? So being a friend of the opposite sex. I remember telling my wife early on, I don't have women as friends, right? So making that declaration to her. And I think the detriment of people, human beings, teens, declaring that is they rush into a relationship trying to find intimacy, trying to create commitment, trying to build trust without doing the most important thing, which is learning how to simply just being a friend to someone else. So what I would say is one of the easiest ways that we can do this is we can just learn how to be a friend without the bias of wanting to be in a relationship with a person, right? Because ultimately, as you get into the relationship, you're going to eventually have to build the friendship. But because we skip the process of learning how to just be friends without wanting to be an intimate partner, now we lack the skills to sustain a relationship over time. So what I would say for those teens who are saying, man, I really want to date, I like this person, I like that, I would say it is so important to have good friendships before you get into an intimate or romantic relationship. And I'll tell you why. When we don't have something, let's just say you go on a fast and you don't eat for a long time. I remember going on a fast for a couple of days. And the first thing I ate was a can of soup. I mean, literally, this was the best soup I ever had in my life, right? I could taste every veggie, every item of seasoning in this can of soup. And I mean, this was just the most basic can of soup. But it was the best to me. Why? Because I had spent so long being malnourished, right? Oftentimes when we jump into relationships, sometimes we'll jump into bad relationships because we're malnourished in friendships, right? The importance of getting good friendships with the opposite sex isn't just so that you can have a bunch of friendships. The importance of getting good friendships with the opposite sex is so that you can have good discernment about whether or not a relationship is because it really needs to happen in an intimate way, or is it happening because you feel so malnourished from not having any type of connection that now you will jump on the first type of availability or the first type of relationship that you can experience. And so I would say one of the reasons why we practice friendship is that it ensures you have a depth about who you are so that when you engage things, you can protect that value so that you'll know, man, this is actually something good. This is not just good because I'm doing it in a moment. The greatest challenge that I think we all have is that we will rely on a relationship with God that others have and not we have. And it is so important to develop your own relationship with God. You cannot have someone else's borrowed relationship. You can observe their relationship, but you need your own relationship with God in order to have like this fulfilled moment. You know, it's interesting when you look at the people of Israel and you look at the Hebrews, they were enslaved and they knew a way of living, right? And it wasn't until they were oppressed and they were harmed, it was like, man, I'm really a slave, that they started crying out for God to free them. So God freed them from this situation with Moshe. When Moses helped free them from the situation, you see that God was bringing them out of this place, but he was trying to shape in them a new desire, a new way, a new understanding, because the old way was the way of oppression and slavery, not the way of liberation. I think that many ways that we defined costliness of our faith We think that the way that we like to do it culturally and instinctually is freedom. It's not, it's bondage, right? The way that God speaks to people is he helps them see, hey, that thing that you thought was so great, I have something better for you on the other side, right? But the process of you getting that better way is learning what his ways are so that you can truly be free. And so when you ask, is there a cost to following Yeshua? There is a cost to following Yeshua. But he says this, he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. He said that the way that you're doing things is actually more oppressive and actually more harmful and actually more overwhelming. And as you learn my ways, which is not a rule list, but a friendship with God, it says, I am a friend of God. Now you learn a burden that's lighter, right? And so the reason why we often struggle with this is because it's packaged in a way that says, I'm learning this new rule list. I'm learning this new burdensome relationship. I'm learning this new obligation. When in fact, the Creator is actually offering you a friendship and making your load lighter and creating in you this new desire, but ultimately giving you what you want and giving us what we want, which is freedom, right? And so, yes, there seems to be a cost, but the cost is just the growing process of us learning what freedom actually is and not the false freedom that we thought we actually had. Specific to shame, we all have it. We all have shame because we all experience pain in this world. And when you're talking about gender fluidity, sexual attraction, sexual orientation, all these different things, there's a lot. There's a lot of acceptance, social norms, how people look at you, how they value you. And when you start saying, man, I identify with same-sex attraction, or I believe that I am the opposite sex, but I'm trapped in a different body, those are real struggles. People are very much so struggling with that. That is not an imagined thing. That's a very real struggle. I think that as someone who is a Black American from the diaspora of Africa, which is all over the world, we are such a communal people that in any type of abnormality, anything that's off, it makes you feel alienated from the culture, right? So there's a culture of Blackness and there's a culture of your family. And now to say that you have something different is abnormal and makes you not as welcome, right? I think another thing that comes in this and into play is what we call post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Because our world has been riddled with racism, has been riddled with this color caste system globally, now those who are Black across the world, specifically men, have the belief and the know-how that they have to protect, right? So when you start saying, okay, I have to protect, I need to speak up, I need to stand out, I need to be these things because there is a real threat, there is a real new Jim Crow, there's a real thing that is, and I need to be trusted in my community as a protector, as a provider, and as a priest, right? If you openly say that you identify with the opposite gender, you're same-sex attracted, or you are a woman stuck in a man's body, I think what it does is the reason why there's such a challenge is it makes it challenging for you to feel like you can confidently speak up for the people you represent, right? And so I think that's more so what it is. It's people have no problem saying, I have pride in these areas. It's just very challenging for you to say, I speak for all of us, right? I think one of the ways that we can resolve this is by getting to know people from that vantage point. James Baldwin was an openly gay man, right? Like he was openly same-sex attracted. And what he said was, he just said, until, one of us free, none of us are free. He said, we're all in the same situation. And so I think part of this is recognizing, yes, people are different. And it doesn't matter your sexual orientation, gender orientation, whatever these things are, you are still a victim of violence from the state, violence from the community, from people who see you as a minority, marginalized person, and could take your life. You struggle with being socially alienated and ostracized. And I think that what we can do for people in those moments is be friends to them, get to know them, learn their story, but then also recognize that they offer more than their gender orientation, right? And I think that as you do that, now you can introduce people of color who are same-sex attracted that can contribute, because they're not. It is not about who they love and who they're attracted to. It's what are they bringing in their personhood to this conversation and the values that they communicate to help other people get free. It is possible. It's absolutely possible. I would say to a Black teen wanting to follow Jesus that's wrestling with their sexual identity, I would just say to you, first and foremost, it's okay that you're on a journey in learning who you are, right? I would also say, don't be so quick to declare your life at 12. Don't be so quick to declare all of you at 15, at 17, as a teen. Like, just learn who you are. Learn these things. Be familiar with it, right? And the culture, though, has a problem because it forces you to identify in totality with that and with everything that comes along with it. And so when you're trying to walk with God, one thing that's very interesting is that God gives us community. He helps us see our identity. He helps us learn what He values. And then He walks with us through the uniqueness of our background and our struggles, right? And so I think part of the reason why people struggle with how do you follow God with these unique things is because no one's teaching you who God is. And when you know who God is outside of the Pauline epistles, and when you see God throughout the Bible, you're like, oh, you're kind. Oh, you're loving. Oh, you're inviting me into a friendship. And it's out of those things that you want to obey, right? If it's all about obeying just because there's consequences, then you're not going to have friendship. Friendship is the key. You want friendship with your Creator. When your Creator has done something for you, has loved you, and is inviting you into something, now it's a pleasure to walk with that, even as a teen. So I would just say, if anyone's struggling with that, learn to know who God is, full scope. And then as you learn to know who God is and He calls you to different things, wrestle with those things so that you can, remember, be more free. Because that's the goal. The goal is freedom and friendship.
Today's question is, what is the sinner's prayer? The sinner's prayer is a prayer a person prays to God when they understand that they are a sinner and in need of a Savior. Saying a sinner's prayer will not accomplish anything on its own. A true sinner's prayer only represents what a person knows, understands, and believes about their sinfulness and need for salvation. The first aspect of a sinner's prayer is understanding that we are all sinners. Romans chapter 3, verse 10 proclaims, "As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one." The Bible makes it clear we have all sinned. We are all sinners in need of mercy and forgiveness from God. Because of our sin, we deserve eternal punishment. The sinner's prayer is a plea for grace instead of judgment. It is a request for mercy instead of wrath. The second aspect of a sinner's prayer is knowing what God has done to remedy our lost and sinful condition. God took on flesh and became a human being in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus taught us the truth about God and lived a perfectly righteous and sinless life. Jesus then died on the cross in our place, taking the punishment that we deserve. Jesus rose from the dead to prove his victory over sin, death, and hell. Because of all of this, we can have our sins forgiven and be promised an eternal home in heaven, if we will just place our faith in Jesus Christ. All we have to do is believe that he died in our place and rose from the dead. We can be saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Jesus Christ alone. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 declares, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is a gift of God." Saying the sinner's prayer is simply a way of declaring to God that you are relying on Jesus Christ as your Savior. There are no magical words that result in salvation. It is only faith in Jesus' death and resurrection that can save us. If you understand that you are a sinner and in need of salvation through Jesus Christ, here is a sinner's prayer that you can pray to God. God, I know that I am a sinner. I know that I deserve the consequences of my sin. However, I am trusting in Jesus Christ as my Savior. I believe that his death and resurrection provided for my forgiveness. I trust in Jesus and Jesus alone as my personal Lord and Savior. Thank you, Lord, for saving me and forgiving me. Amen.